Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Business Builders Show. My name is Marty Wolf, and I am the host of the Business Builders Show. And I'm delighted to have a special guest with me today, someone who's been with us before, and that is August Turak. Hi, Augie. How are you
How are
today?
you doing? Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Love it.
It's a delight to have you. We'll get into the different books that you've written, but today we are going to focus on your latest book, and I'm going to read it so I get everything accurate. And Augie's latest book is Not Less Than Everything: One Man's Quest for Spiritual Enlightenment. Wow. So, a little bit of an introduction. As a member of the original team that launched MTV, that's music television, and a successful high-tech entrepreneur, Turak had what most people consider to be the good life. But he was not happy. This is the book. This is the inspirational true story of how Augie Turak overcame crippling depression and despair through a daring quest for life's ultimate meaning and purpose, a search for transcendence. Transcendence. Wow, Augie, I can't wait to get into this book, but I do want to mention, in addition to Not Less Than Everything, One Man's Quest for Spiritual Enlightenment, there's the picture of that for those who are seeing. He also wrote a book called Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, which I will put in the show notes, and one of my favorite books of all time called Brother John. And I'm sure we'll touch on these as we go through it. Okay, Augie, I read your book, Not Less Than Everything: One Man's Quest for Spiritual Enlightenment. Augie, this is an incredibly personal story. Wow. So, when and why did you decide to share some incredibly intimate details of your journey? What got this in your mind and heart?
Wow, that's an incredibly good question. And there's several different kinds of answers I can give you. One would be the accidental answer. Of course, in my first book, Business Secrets, I talk about happy accidents. And I was invited to Rome to speak to the Pontifical University in the Vatican about my first book, Business Secrets of Trappist Monks, back in 2020. And right when we were about to leave, they canceled because of the virus. I went anyway with my brothers and had an incredible time because we had Rome to ourselves. But when I got back, that was March of 2020, everything was closed. I was closed in. And so I was going through uh, some old emails, and I saw an email from the guy that helped me put the book proposal together for Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks back in 2012 or whatever that was. And I'd never met the man. He lives on the West Coast. He's a writer himself. He teaches creative writing at University of Southern California. And Alex Schnitzler's his name. And I saw this wonderful email from him that he wrote to me back when we were working together on the proposal for Business Secrets of the Trappists. So I just banged an email out to him, and I said, "Alex, you still out there, you old son of a gun?" And boom, his email was still good. He wrote back to me, and he said, I said, "Hey, Alex, now that I got you, I got all this stuff that I've been writing for years about my spiritual journey and stuff." And and he said, "Send it to me." I sent it to him with like 600 pages of all this different stuff I'd written. And he wrote back and he said, "There's all kinds of wonderful stories here." He said, "But neither one of these manuscripts is a book." And he got me on the phone and he said, "Augie," he said, "what's missing is you as the protagonist." He said, "Are you comfortable being the star of your own book?" And I said, "Yes, no." He said, "It's clear here." He said, "So let's talk. We're already touching about all my books now." He said, "The reason why people love Brother John so much, your book, Brother John," he said, "is not because they identify with Brother John. He's the saint. We can't identify with the saint." He said, "People identify with you and the struggles you were going through."
Wow.
And he said, "And you've got to you've got to let people identify with you and take this trip with you." He said, and that was the first. And then the second thing he said to me was, um, "Why did you get into spirituality? Why did you take this trip?" And I said, "Oh, Alex, people have been asking me that for years and years." And he said, "My answer is always, well, I was called. It's a vocation." But nobody wants to hear that nowadays. And he said to me, he was really stern. He said, "That ain't going to cut it." And he threw in a kind of little profanity in there, too. He said, "That ain't going to cut it." He said, people want to know. You got to answer that question. So that's kind of the accidental reason why I went back and started really none of the stuff about my depression and the trouble that I was in as a college student was new information. It wasn't like I was unearthing repressed memories or anything like that. But as I started into the process, these things came out. The second reason why I decided to do such a deep dive and so personal was I want to turn people on to what I believe is an authentic spiritual quest. And if I'm going to, turn people on, I got to show the vulnerability. I got to show the authenticity. I got to tell the truth. In the same way, you don't write a book about seeking the truth and then hide the truth. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. The final reason is that so many people over the years have said, wow, so many cool things have happened to you. You have all these stories. How come you've never written them all down? So that's the third reason why I did it.
Wow. Well, again, I'm not sure when the spiritual journey actually started, but maybe we'll start with, well, you tell me where you want to start, but the first, I guess, official launch is this gentleman by the name of Mr. Rose.
Uh-huh. Right.
What an interesting journey. So you can start anywhere you want. I thought maybe that was a leaping up.
Yeah, I mean,
you may want to go before that. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, the book starts with me. It starts with me jumping out of an airplane in 1996.
Oh, that's
and
right.
then it goes into a retrospective where it goes back to when I'm 19 on the beach, and I'm sharing with a young girl that I met on the beach that summer, Nancy, all the angst that I'm going through. What is the life worth living? How can you end up, back then, 60s, 70s, we were all, we didn't want to end up with 2.3 kids and a white picket fence and 2 cars and a mortgage and wondering what the hell happened, where did my life go? And I wanted something meaningful, something, I say early in the book, I said, I quoted from Apocalypse Now, one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie, where Willard, Martin Sheen's character, says, he said, I wanted a mission, and for my sins they gave me one, and I never want another one. And I said, yes, that's what I wanted. I wanted a mission. I wanted a mission so good and so pure that I could give myself utterly to it without reservation, without any sense that there would ever be any, and I called it a redemptive mission. And then I stumbled into Zen Buddhism, and I got really, really fascinated by the clean way in which Zen treats, and it introduced me to this idea that there's this thing called Satori, or cosmic consciousness, or in yoga it's called Samadhi, in Christianity it's the Unio Mystico, that there's this cataclysmic spiritual experience that solves all of our life's problems, that answers all your questions, and gives you a certainty about what life is all about. And something in that just grabbed me. And not long after that, one of my friends, Ray Sosko, who I only identify as Ray in the book, who I still know, by the way, called me up and said that this guy was giving a speech on Zen at the Theosophical Society, and that's how I met this wild West Virginia, crazy, hillbilly Zen master, Richard Rose.
You're so descriptive in the book. It's really great. He sounded like quite a character. I like to meet this guy. I would have liked to have met him, back then.
It's funny that you say that, because I'm working on the audio version of the book, and I hired this wild, crazy sound engineer here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I live on a farm outside of Raleigh, and it turns out he's a really, really country. He's from Lizard Lick, North Carolina. But he's also incredibly accomplished. He works with Aerosmith and all these bands. He goes on tour with them to do all kinds of technology for them. And so he starts into the audio version of this book. We get about 2 chapters or 3 chapters in. And he says, and I hear in my headphones, he says, son, he's about 20 years younger than me, he calls me son. Son, ain't nobody going to buy this book. And I said, well, what? I said, Matt, why do you say that? He says, because you're telling people the truth. He says, people don't want the truth for free, let alone buy it. Well, the reason I thought about him is he said about 20 times, boy, I'd like to have met that Richard Rose guy. I'd really like to meet that Richard Rose guy.
Well, he had obviously a huge impact on your life and everything going on. I want to mention several times, so I'm going to break in now and say we are speaking with August Turak, and you can learn more about him and his book at augustturak.com. That's Turak, augustturak.com. I am calling him Augie. I feel like we're friends since I've read his books and we've communicated over the years. I have to ask this question, maybe not in the right order. Explain the title. Not less than everything. Not less than everything. I get the one man's quest for spiritual enlightenment, but not less than everything. Help me.
All right. I mean, I tell you, you're asking some darn good questions. Matter of fact, I was on last night. I was on another podcast last night, and the guy said to me, "What question would you like people to ask that they know?" Well, you've already asked two really good ones.
Okay, good.
So I'm a big fan of T.S. Eliot's poetry. And,
obviously, it's throughout the book.
Yes, and T.S. Eliot wrote the four quartets, and it's a mystical poem. It's the best, all these paradoxical things and it all is built and woven with the idea of time. My analysis is that T.S. Eliot is trying to give us God's perspective, because eternity doesn't mean a lot of time. When somebody says, well, you're going to be someplace for eternity, that doesn't mean years and years and years and years. Eternity is outside of time. There is no time. It's beyond time. And one of my favorite quotes, which I always tell people, in my opinion, T.S. Eliot is telling us, this is my definition of spirituality. He doesn't actually say that in the poem, obviously. But he says, a condition of complete simplicity, costing not less than everything. And
wow. Okay.
And that's, I have that quote right in the beginning of the book. A condition of complete simplicity, costing not less than everything. And I always like to delineate for people, we're not talking about simple-mindedness. We're not talking about simpleness. We're talking about simplicity. In the same sense that when I first started taking golf lessons, my golf pro said, I want to give you a simple, low-energy, natural, spontaneous, repeatable golf swing. Simple. And if you're a hockey fan, I'm kind of a hockey fan. It's ad nauseum. It's annoying, actually, if they interview these darn. Got to keep it simple. We've got to keep it simple. Got to keep it simple. And so simplicity is the essence, And to me, what he also means is simplicity means getting out of your own way. It means self, ultimate humility. He says later in the poem, and I actually quote it, as you mentioned, each one of my chapters has an excerpt at the beginning from four quartets, which I'm hopefully people notice maybe that I think it picks up on the themes of that chapter. And at one point, one of them says, there is only humility, and humility is endless. So the spiritual path is a complete more and more humility. And that's what I think he means by utter simplicity, but it costs everything.
Yeah. Well, let's go down that road for a minute.
Okay.
You started this as a young man. You had some tough times that you detailed in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But in the meantime, you're a successful business person.
Right.
I mean, you're at MTV, you're high tech. You're doing some good stuff, man, through all of this.
Right.
How did you keep it glued together, I guess, is the question.
That's
or didn't you?
It's kind of like when I finally told that Bill Richards, that psychologist, when I was finally, the crisis comes right before the spiritual experience that is the culmination of the book. I said, I'm coming apart. And he says, no, you're coming together. But, one of the biggest comments that I'm getting repeatedly, I can't even, from people that I've, close friends that I sent the book to before I published it looking for a blurb, close friends and even family members who have read it since it's come out. I thought I knew you and I didn't know you at all. Wow. Most people think they know, I was, my college, working with these college kids has really paid off for me in 1,000 different ways, even though everybody critiqued me when I was coaching college students on college campuses on spirituality for free, especially my dad. You know what the hell you're doing? You're working for free. You're not even on the faculty. Yeah. Well, it's paid. One of the things that it paid off for me is I ended up doing some work for a company called Yext in New York back in 2010. I only worked for 4 months. They were my former students from Duke. They couldn't pay me, so they gave me a bunch of stock. I only worked 4 months. I came home, forgot about it. They went public for a couple $2 billion. The stock was $28 a share. So I wrote to my brothers and I said,
Wow.
well, my ship has come in. And my brother John wrote back. He said, your ship came in the day you were born. And I think a lot of people who know that part of my life that you're talking about, being one of the founders of MTV, being the protege of the guy who started the IBM Executive School, being a successful entrepreneur, selling companies, that, man, my life has just been this. My father used to, my dad had 7 sons and then a daughter. He had 8 children, and I'm his oldest. And he used to say to me, he said, Augie, if you fell in a pile of poop, you'd come out with a $20 bill. But he didn't say poop.
Yeah, I get it.
You'd come out with a 20. That I think that's what most people think. They don't have any idea of the internal struggles that I was going through.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, this is called the Business Builder Show.
Mm-hmm.
So I certainly struggle just like everybody else in different things. I was just talking to a friend of mine before we came on to do this interview, and we got talking about it. I said, I got to stop talking about it. My counseling session is over. I got to talk to the guy who wrote the book. Mm-hmm. He says, well, we all feel this every now and then to differing degrees. So that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. So people are saying, I thought I knew you, but I didn't. Are you getting folks calling you, emailing you, sending letters when saying, wow, I really identified this with this because I too am struggling, or I too am looking for this transcendence? Are you getting that kind of feedback?
Yes, and I've gotten some couple of deeply, deeply personal emails. One guy said, Augie, this is a great book, and it's I admire the authenticity. He says, but I have to say I squirmed through the whole book.
Yeah,
another guy who actually is in my, I won't identify him, but he is actually in my first book, Business Secrets That Trap Us Monks, and he wrote, and he said, well, actually, I can't write. His name is Kenny. He was the guy that owned One Tree, because he gave me a blurb that basically said this, and he said. He had One Tree Software, which was the company I worked with in my first Business Secrets book. But anyway, he said, August Turak outlines the way life should be, the way I should be living my life. So the question remains, why am I not living it that way? And I got an email from a guy I went to prep school with, who I've talked to maybe twice in 50 years, and we were friendly at school, but we weren't best friends or anything. And he said, I can't even imagine taking this kind of he said, I am a meek person. I am a mild person. He said, I don't have the courage to have undertaken something like this. So, so I have. So the answer, yes, I have gotten from a number of people. The other thing that men especially seem to relate to is the idea that plagued me throughout my whole life, my whole spiritual path, is I want to go all in. I want to live life all in. I want to live, I keep using the expression, at the edge of possibility. I want to be everything I could possibly be as a human being and as a man. And that means, throwing caution, throwing all your fears to the wind and really just going for it. So what would it mean if you took life itself as the thing you were going for, which is that story about that, which I love, that story in the beginning of my book of the Vietnam vet talking about what it was like to live in Vietnam when he was 100% committed, he called it a single point of white hot intensity called life. To live in that spot, T.S. Eliot calls it the still point of the turning world. And I wanted that so desperately. But what I found throughout my life was because of fear. The basic thing is fear, that you always hedge. You always keep one.
Yeah.
You go. I kept coming back to the analogy. You got one foot on the gas, one on the brake, one on the gas,
Yep.
one on the brake.
Yep.
Always trying to hedge your bets, and I hated myself for that because you're always hedging. You're always, and so I think a lot of men especially relate to that that longing to know what it would be like. I've often said, by the way, that one of my greatest one of the things I'm most thankful for is I never had to go to Vietnam. And one of the things I'm most regretful for is I didn't have to go to Vietnam.
I share exactly the same feelings.
Because
I'm with you.
every man wants to know what would he do under maximum when everything is on the line. When every single thing is on the line, would you crumble up or would you pull it off? And one of the wonderful things that comes out of this book is I found that out because I got to that point towards the end of the book where I called my company. I was in Baltimore working with that Bill Richards. Everything's coming down around my head, and I called up and I said I'm never coming home because I'm either going to die or go be institutionalized. And one of my partners
that hit me when I read that. That hit me. Okay.
Yeah, and my partner Dave Gold blurts out, who was also a student of Richard Rose's, and he says, "Well, what do you know for sure?" Which, if I'd have been in a better frame of mind, I might have laughed about. He said that because I was terrifying him. He couldn't think of anything else to say because Richard Rose, when he would meet somebody, he would say, "Hi, the name's Rose. What do you know for sure?" That was his opener.
That was his opening line.
Yeah. What do you know for sure? And so he asked me what I know for sure, and then spontaneously I just said, I'll tell you. I said, I had a dream last night that the psychologist I'm working with, Bill Richards, said, "You're so beat up, Augie. You've been through so much. Why don't you go back to Raleigh and rest up for a month or so and come back and we'll finish this?" And I said, Dave, in my dream, I said, no. I said, it ends here. It ends here, Dave. I no longer can live another moment of my life in fear and ignorance. I don't care whether I die or go insane. It ends here. And to me, that's when I hit the condition of complete simplicity where I was willing to risk everything.
So as I read the book and as others have read it, I mean, that hit home for me, those thoughts. I think the other part of it, Augie, is that I thought of vulnerability. Especially men hate that idea of being vulnerable. Like some of the things you said, I just like, my God, this guy's got courage, But as I'm reading, I'm thinking, well, there's a whole lot of people, including me, not all the book, but there's including me who would identify with that and could think about that. So I like it. I like it on obviously the personal level, and I like it on the business level because this wasn't a 3-month journey you went through. Let's make this
clear.
It
wasn't a weekend retreat.
No, this was, you had plenty of those and you were away, but this was decades, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can't back away. You've got to keep going for it, right?
Right.
As you did.
Richard Rose kept saying, which is one of the things, today, when I talk to people, one of the reasons I wanted to write the book too, or what I like about the book, is I want to cut through the nonsense. Spirituality is not mindfulness and just being just trying to remind yourself to stay in the present, or it's not your weekly yoga class. It's not, and Rose at one point in the book says commitment. It's all about commitment. And this is something I work really hard on to explain in my first book in the business sense. You have to have a back against the wall mentality. We started our business on $2,500, and Dave Gold, the same guy who said, "What do you know for sure?" said, "Our business plan is we're smart guys. We'll figure out something to do." But we had a back against the wall mentality. We were going to either be successful or die trying. Yeah. And you have to have the same attitude about everything in life, and you have to have that attitude about spirituality. And so I wanted to bring that home, and for me to cut through the nonsense by the way, in my first book, I talk all about the hero's journey, and in a way, this now this is me, this is me taking the hero's journey. And I made a big point that the third stage of the hero's journey, the first is the call. This is when the burning bush calls to Moses, or in a movie, it's always when a telephone call rings and somebody tells Clint Eastwood that he's got to come back to the army because only he can save the world, and he's an alcoholic and blah blah blah. And the second stage is the resistance to the call, because Moses tells the burning bush, "I'm not the guy," And of course, and when Clint Eastwood first gets the call, I wouldn't come back. I wouldn't work with you guys again. Yeah. So there's always resistance to the call. And then finally, the hero accepts the vocation. And then the next stage is the desert. And this is the trials and tribulations. This is the Israelites wandering around in circles for 40 years, or what Rose told me was ever decreasing concentric circles until you run your own butt up your own butt and disappear. Nobody wants to go to the desert. Everybody wants to pitch spirituality without the desert. Just say your mantra 3 times a day. Just eat brown rice. It's the spiritual version of eat everything you want and you'll still lose weight. Just take this pill. Just say this mantra and you can eat anything else. No, you got to go to the desert. And for me to demonstrate, for me to make that point, I got to show people how I went to the desert.
Yeah.
Another thing I'd like to throw in here at this point.
Go ahead.
Which is, it's funny that you said it takes so much courage for me to show as much vulnerability and be open. And the funny thing is the spiritual experience that I had in 1998 made that effortless. I don't feel like it took any effort at all or any courage. That's who I am.
Right.
That's just who I am.
You developed into that over time, and you went all in, and
that's who I am, and I don't have fear. I don't live in fear anymore. And so, what can they do to me? And that's the point that I also want to make, is that after battling depression all my life from the age of 14, and then when I break my ankle in the skydiving accident, I hit the dark night of the soul and have 2 years of an unbelievable depression. I've never had a moment's depression in 25 years now. Not one moment. Now, my brother was killed in an accident, and I got very, very sad. But that's not depression. That's normal. That's natural. That's good. I have not had a moment's anxiety. Not had a moment. Probably one of the most important stories that I tell in the book, which I don't know how many people pick up on it, but after I come back from Baltimore, after I have this spiritual experience, I go to see my mentor over at Duke University, and I tell him everything I went through and what I found. And he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, Augie, there's no doubt in my mind you have been seized by the hand of God. He said, but I'm so glad that he has taken a gentler path with me. And the next thing I remember, I'm standing in the middle of this beautiful Gothic chapel, completely empty except for me. I'm crying like a baby. And the only thought in my mind was, he doesn't know what he just said. I would go through 1,000,000 times the suffering I just went through to find a fragment of what I found on the other side. And this is this is my vocational call. This book is my call, trying to reach out to other people and saying, take the trip. Remember the story with Richard Rose when the hippies come in and they try to freak on him, and Ziggy and they try to, and he turns it completely around and turns them into his followers, and eventually I end up saying, why don't you asked him, well, how'd you do this? What did it? And he finally says, he said it was some of that and none of that and BS besides. He said, instead of asking me all these stupid questions, take the trip. Why don't you just take the trip? He said, then you won't have to ask me anything. I want people to take the trip. Not read a book. Not read another darn book and then put it up on the shelf. Take the trip.
That's one of the reasons we're here, to try to get as many people to read the book. They're going to have to read the book first, or maybe they're well on their journey, and this could be further, whatever you want to call it, inspiration or learning to keep going through whatever you might be going through. And again, this is not exclusive. Business people have these struggles, as everybody else does. But I love the book. So we're going to wrap up. I'm going to tell everybody again, First of all, his website is augustturak.com, Turak. His latest book, again, is Not Less Than Everything. He explained what that means, T.S. Eliot. By the way, on the cover, it says there's somebody who gave this book some support. And here's what this is what this person says. It says, when it comes to spirituality and life, Turak is as authentic as it gets. Wonderful read. And that person is one of my favorite actors, Michael Keaton, who is your friend from Pittsburgh.
Yep, Michael Keaton's an old friend of mine. But I want to add, I want to throw in a couple quick things there. You come to augustturak.com. We're offering the book for 50% off right now. And Amazon is currently running a special offer on the electronic version of the book for 99 cents. So you can get the Kindle version of Not Less Than Everything for 99 cents, and you can get 50% off on the actual book. Also, there's a lot of articles and stuff that I wrote for Forbes, leadership articles that I wrote for Forbes that you can find on my website too.
Yeah, go to the website, check it out. And again, his other books are Brother John and the Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. You'll love all of his work. Augie, thank you for your work. Thank you for your journey. Thank you for your authenticity of sharing it with us. Our audience is going to enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Well, God bless you. I really enjoyed it. And by the way, super questions.